Yes, indeed, boys and girls, it is electric. Your humble host, Lars Ulrich, hitting you from somewhere in the greater Bay Area of San Francisco. It's Electric, episode 22. And 5-6 feet away from me, behind a foamy phallus.
Yes.
A giant foamy phallus is Les Claypool, friend of Lars, friend of Metallica's, friend of Kirk Hammett's, friend of the Bay Area.
Friend of all creatures.
Friend of the world of music in general. All creatures, including cats. And
big, small, furry, bald. I'm a friend of all creatures.
And phallic-y.
Well, let's not get too carried away there.
We have convinced him to put on his Beats headphones.
My Beats headphones, because I do enjoy Beats. If I was going to put headphones on in the shower, they would be Beats.
That's right. You all dressed up for a night on the town?
Night on the town, the big Sam's Clam Disco. We're going to go out and paint the town chartreuse.
Good, as it should be painted. Sam's Clams Disco.
Sam Clam Disco.
I want to go.
What do you mean you want to go? I invited you to go, and you said you got sandwiches to make or something.
Right.
You got kids at home.
But just because
you got to cut the crust off the bread.
Just because I can't go doesn't mean I don't want to go. I really want to go, especially since I can't go.
You have FOMO.
That's right.
I've just recently learned this word, FOMO.
Explain.
Well, my wife's friends, they're all kind of, go get 'em gals, and we were off doing something somewhere in Europe, and they were texting, oh, I have such FOMO. I'm like, what the FOMO? What the hell is that? Well, it's fear of missing out.
Well, I have big time FOMO.
Yeah, see?
Listen, growing up as an only child.
You're a FOMosexual is what you are.
Yeah, FOMosexual. I like that. Growing up as an only child in Denmark and always feeling like I was missing out and spending way too much time on my own.
Really?
Yeah. This is not about me. This is about you.
I want to hear about that. I don't know much about your upbringing in Denmark. You played tennis, am I correct? That's what I heard.
And on episode 22, our guest is Lars Ulrich. Yes, I grew up in a tennis-playing family. My father was a professional tennis player. So
I've met your father. He's a good man. I like that guy.
Actually, it's his birthday in a couple of weeks. 89 years old, just getting started. This fall in L.A. in November, he's got a painting exhibition that's opening. So he's working it and doing it and creating and being cool. But growing up in tennis, when you grow up around the tennis circuit, that's kind of like what you think you're going to aspire to be as a tennis player. So the first 12 to 14 years, I was an only child, an aspiring tennis player, but music and rock and roll was what kept me sane from the discipline and the awkward world of tennis. And then I came to America in 1980 when I was 17 to pursue my tennis career in Denmark. I was ranked in the top 10 of tennis players in my age group, and when I came to LA, I wasn't ranked in the top 10 on the street that I lived on.
Really?
So that was kind of a mind f***. And then I ended up starting a band, and now I have a radio show. There you go. That was my history in 2.5 minutes.
You started one band, and it became the band that's roaming the planet, stomping
That's it. It's the only band I've ever been in.
Wow, really? That's amazing. I didn't know that.
Unlike you, who have been in
I'm a musical whore. I'm in everybody's band.
You've been in, 2 or 3 bands? Or is it 2,000 or 3,000 bands?
Yeah, I've been in a lot of bands.
Somebody asked me the other day, I said, what are you doing after this? I go, I'm not doing anything. When this is done, not the radio show, which the radio show career will end way before the other career. But when I'm done with that, I want to be able to say that I was only ever in one band.
I like it.
You mentioned, somebody mentioned Kirk Hammett.
Yes, the mighty hamster.
Did you and Kirk Hammett ever create music together?
There were some jams, but I never. Check this out. So this is how it all kind of began. Is I would come into algebra class, and we were both little guys. I think I was in 9th grade, and maybe he was in 10th grade, and I hadn't had my.
And this was at El Sobrante High.
De Anza High.
I
mean El Sobrante. El Sobrante. But if you're from there, you go El Sobrante. I hadn't had my growth spurt yet, and I think he's still waiting for his growth spurt.
I believe he is.
But,
yes.
I would come into class, and I would always be like singing some song, like singing some Aerosmith song or whatever. And he was always looking at these magazines and the guitar magazines. And he was like little Filipino Tommy Chong. Like that's the way he's like, hey Claypool, check it out, man, check it out. And he'd show me a picture. He's like, I'm getting that one right there. And he showed me a picture of the Stratocaster that he wanted, that he was going to get, that I think he eventually did get.
Right.
But he'd hear me singing these songs. He's like, hey, man, you got to come sing for my band. You got to come sing for my band. And he would give me cassette tapes all the time. He's the guy that turned me on to Hendrix. I'd never really heard Hendrix before then. And he's like, hey, come sing for my band. Here, learn this song. And he wanted me to sing Sunshine of Your Love.
The Cream.
Yes.
Course, yeah.
So I went home and I'm like learning the song, and I was too embarrassed. I was just too bashful, and I couldn't do it. I said,
But had you been doing any singing up till that point?
Just walking around, you know. So I didn't do it. I didn't take him up on singing for his band, and I met some other guy who was like a local hotshot guitar player who needed a bass player, and so somehow I ended up with a bass, and that's how I got started. And I think Kirk even mentioned he was pissed at me or something because I didn't do his band, but I ended up playing bass for this other guy's band, but that might just be lore, I'm not sure. But it all started, my interest in getting into any of this was because of him with his pictures of the Stratocaster, and then him wanting me to sing for his band and me chickening out because I couldn't sing. I still can barely sing. And so I ended up with a bass and in a band, and there you go.
And were you guys in the same grade?
He was a year older than me.
Year ahead of you?
Yes.
I've never heard that. We can retitle this Les Claypool, The Truth. Finally. So all this stuff, when did the formative versions of Primus start?
I started Primus in '84. It was just myself and a Fostex recorder and a Lindrum. What do you think of that?
I remember Lindrums. The first time I was ever introduced to a click track was via Lindrum.
Well, it was one of the first Lindrums because I used to work for this audio company, so I went to
that was the
NAMM
same
show.
In 1984. We were recording Ride the Lightning, and we were doing For Whom the Bell Tolls, and I could not find the fucking pocket. And the guy goes, maybe you need a click track. I was like, what's a click track? And he goes, let me show you what a click track is. And then the Lindrum came out of the closet and has been my friend ever since. But sorry, so it was the Fostex and the Lindrum.
And I wrote a song called Too Many Puppies. It's similar to the way it sounds today, but it was double time. So I was very influenced by Public Image and early Gabriel and even like things like B-52s and Devo and stuff like that. So it was a little more angular.
That's a pretty wide musical palette, though. That's really cool.
The original Too Many Puppies was like clink, 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 clink. It was more frenetic. And then a fellow by the name of Todd Huth, who was in a band when I was in high school, and he actually went out with Denise McGarry, who was in junior high. She had the biggest. So we were all very impressed by Todd Huth. He was one of those good-looking guys that actually got girls. So he came, and I was like, oh, there's no way this guy's gonna be. He's like, because I wanted somebody like Adrian Belew or Robert Fripp. I wanted somebody who's kind of weird and angular, and Todd just happened to be that guy. He's very angular, textural player. So that's what it was originally Primate, and then somebody called and said, I have that name, you can't use it anymore. We were getting radio airplay right off the bat on a station called The Quake. So we changed it to Primus.
Okay.
So there you go.
Primate, I love that.
You're a Primate.
Les Claypool from Primate.
Yeah.
So when did Larry and Tim, without being disrespectful to the other members, but a lot of fans consider that sort of the classic lineup, when did that settle? That was the lineup that made the records in the 90s, and
right
when because those dudes weren't part of the OG lineup, were they?
They weren't the OG, but they're the OG that people have come to know and love. Basically, Todd had a couple kids, got married, and said, I can't do this anymore. We literally had 8 drummers from 1984 to 1988 because drummer rhymes with bummer. I don't know if you know that, but
you know what? I never got that memo.
Yeah,
it must be
I'm just
floating
giving it to you right now.
Thank you.
Well, you must have something going on because you've been in the same band for
Did I mention
30 years or
I've
something?
only ever been in one band.
Yeah.
Did I mention?
Bodes well for you. I mean, it means you're a likable fellow.
And you know what? At this
I've played with a lot of guys that are great that you just can't be in the same room with them.
You know what? And if this keeps going, we may actually turn professional or do this full time.
I like it.
So, there may even be a record deal. This radio show may lead to a record deal. So it could all work out.
Record deals aren't what they
used to be.
Yeah.
Okay. I spotted that part. And you know what? You and I have played music together.
Correct.
Many times. Well, not many times.
Times.
But we mentioned the KSJO Jam.
Yes.
Back there in, that was probably around 99, give or take. It was when the Garage Inc. album came. So it was 98. It was you and me and Jerry Cantrell and the rest of the Metallica fellas and
somebody
Popper.
From Skinnerd.
Gary Rossington.
Yes.
And was Popper there, the Blues Traveler dude?
I don't remember if Popper was there. I mean, I know Popper. I would think, but first of all, I don't remember much of anything these days. I don't know what the hell is going on. There's definitely my hard drive is fragmented.
A couple of these words out there that would trigger. I remember we were in this radio station down there and we were playing.
Can I tell the greatest thing that happened that night?
Please.
Yeah. So anyway, for folks
and then
out
I'll
there,
tell you what the greatest thing that happened to me that night because it involves you.
It
So
does?
You go first.
All right. All right, so I got invited down. It's a very honorable thing to be able to come down and play with my old buddy Kirk and the Metallica guys, and I learned a couple tunes, and I brought my bass banjo because I figured, hey, this will work great with Metallica. So we all get in this room. We're in this room, and it's this control room, and there's a glass just like that, and Lars is on the other side of it, and he's like, I can't hear James. I can't see James. They're like, well, we don't know what to do. Blah, blah, we can't fit you in the room. Take the glass out, and we all kind of chuckle, ha ha ha. Take the glass out. Guys came in and removed the glass from the studio. And so I went back afterwards because Brain was actually playing in Primus at that point in time, if you know Brain. And I said, dude, Lars couldn't see James, so he had the glass. He's like, dude, you gotta be kidding me. That's so heavy. That's unbelievable, man. He removed the glass. Oh my God. And he just thought that was the greatest thing he'd ever heard in his entire life.
What's funny is that I have no recollection of that. But no, that's cool. No, it's listen. It like we were talking about before briefly out there is that as long as I can connect to James, then I'm safe, or then I'm good, or then it's all going to be okay.
That's a very profound thing that you just said.
Oh, we just got serious for a second.
This is not a joke, but you guys are like musical soulmates.
Yes, we are. Yes, and as you get older, 36 years now, you appreciate it more and more. Because back then, you don't have the capacity to actually connect that or articulate or intellectualize it. But as you sit here 35 years later, go, all of a sudden, this is really cool. I have a special bond with this fella. You know what I mean? But I'll tell you the highlight for me of that night, because it involved you. And it was something you said. Because we were jamming and we were playing the Leonard Skinner song, Tuesday's Gone. And it literally went on for like half an hour. We kept playing the last chorus just over and over. Nobody could figure out how to end it. But you came to me afterwards as we were sort of having a beverage or rolling out or whatever we were doing. And you said something to the effect of, you're actually a really good drummer. You said that to me, and I was touched. You were talking about the pocket, about like where I put the beat.
I remember. I said you have a great groove. I play with all these musicians all the time. And for me, it's like having conversations with different people. I think you and I discussed this at your thing at the Zellerbach that one night. When you're talking with different people, you're talking about different things. There's different levels of interest and culture and intellect and all these different things, but you can take away and bring things to a conversation. It's very similar musically, but one of the most fundamental things for me playing with different people is the notion of finding that pocket. And especially with a drummer, that's a huge thing. I was joking. I'm not joking. Drummer rhymes with bummer. We went through 8 different drummers before Tim Alexander showed up. And even then, he's bounced in and out a couple times. And I play with a lot of different drummers. So having that relationship, I know a lot of players that do all this crazy stuff. They can do all these crazy things on whatever their instrument is, but they can't connect. And it's like the difference between reading a speech and having a conversation, a flowing conversation.
Beats 1.
It's Electric with Lars Ulrich.
Without being disrespectful to all the other guys that you play with, is Tim the drummer that you feel that you have the easiest or the most effortless connection with?
I sort of equate my musical relationship with Tim, Herb, we call him Herb, similar to what Sting and Stewart have. But not nearly, those guys they have a bit of a heated relationship, to say the least. We don't have that. He's a great guy, very nice guy, but musically, we don't always see things the same. And it's not like we argue about it. When we come into a groove or a riff or something, he'll approach it different than I will hear it in my head. And in the early days, I would go, no, dude, it's got to be more like this. But now I've learned to let it flow and do its thing, because there's a few songs that I can think of that when he recorded the drum part, I was like, he's feeling it wrong. And then I get it and I realize, well, that's what's making that piece unique. It's taking it beyond what I would just have done hiring a session drummer or something. You know what I mean? And I think it's the same with Sting and Stewart. It's like, you hear Sting's music and love it or hate it. He's playing with Vinnie Colaiuta and all these amazing players. But when he plays with Stewart, something incredibly unique and interesting comes out of it that doesn't come when he plays with anybody else. And it's very similar with me and Herb. Love it or hate it, it's very different than what happens when I play with other people.
When you do a lot of your other projects, and obviously there, as you said, there's a lot of them, do you bring stuff from all those different experiences back to Primus, or do you leave it like Every time I go and do another creative endeavor, it feels like I bring something back to Metallica. Just, I don't know, necessarily articulate what it is, but you just go and you have a different creative experience, and that brings a different outlook back to my primary thing. So when you do all these different experiences, do you always bring something back to Primus, or because you do so many of them, do they mostly just get left out there where you have those musical endeavors?
Well, I think there's a little bit of both. I think, you get that urge to scratch an itch that's not being scratched with these three guys that you've been playing with for a long time. So you go do something, play something that I've done some of these other projects. One of the first things I did was Highball with the Devil, the Holy Mackerel, and I always said, these are the songs I wouldn't inflict upon the guys in Primus, and that's kind of what they were. But once you're doing that, it gives you an appreciation when you do come back to the fold for what you have there. And I think you do bring bits and pieces back, like, playing with Sean, Sean Lennon. I had to have this project with Sean. Playing with someone like him, working with someone like him, and seeing his method, especially the way he approaches vocals and the layering of vocals, and he knows what he's doing. Bringing some of that to this project, this Goblin thing. It's like I go back to that conversation thing. The more people you have conversations with, and the more you are expanding your horizons, the more you're bringing that back to your own thing. In the end of the '90s, when Primus we basically broke up, but we said hiatus so we wouldn't, freak anybody out. I went and did all this shit. I bought an Airstream motorhome and filled it full of my favorite musicians and drove up and down the coast just playing bars, and didn't play a single Primus song, and played a lot of cover tunes and had a blast. And during that 10-year period when I was doing Frog Brigade and Oysterhead and all these different things, it was probably the biggest growth in my life as a musician, because I got more comfortable with my singing. But it was all playing with other people. Back to the conversation thing, I think it expands your vocabulary, musical vocabulary, to play with all these different people. And it changes your perspectives, makes you appreciate what you have with your dudes that got you to this certain spot in the first place. I'm in a band, we haven't done it in a while, but I'm in a band with Stuart Copeland. That's pretty unbelievable.
That's pretty crazy.
Besides John Bonham,
I want to be in a band with Stuart Copeland.
It's unbelievable. Playing with Adrian Belew, that's unbelievable. Danny Carey. The greatest thing, and we lost him this last year, was Bernie Worrell. Of all the musicians I've played with, that guy was by far the most amazing musician I've ever played with. People don't realize how influential he has been on music, especially soul and hip hop, because he's been on so many songs and written so many bits and pieces of so many different songs that have been a part of soul and hip hop culture, and continue to be for the past 30 years plus. He was classically trained pianist, and he played all these synths and stuff. The thing about Bernie is he died of lung cancer this last year, but he had what I called salt. Like, he had lived it. He'd been through all this stuff, and it came out in his fingers. And so I remember one time he and I and Buckethead and Brain were up at my house recording, and we said, "Hey, Bernie, we need a solo for this one part of the song." He's like, "Oh, man, my fingers, man, my fingers." He always wears gloves because he has arthritis. My fingers. He's like, "I can only do it once. And so we're like, all right. So we're rolling the tape, and there he goes. And I remember just looking at Buckethead and him looking at me, and we were just like, holy this amazing thing came out of Bernie, and just like, he only could do it once because his fingers were hurting him. But back to that conversation thing, he had been there, done that in so many different ways, on so many different levels that I probably can't even comprehend. He was so easily able to express that through his fingers and his music.
Now you have a new record that is the first record with Tim and Larry since 95?
Well, it's the first original record. We reinterpreted the music from Willy Wonka a couple years ago.
Apart from the Willy Wonka experience, so this is 22 years. You guys made a record again. Is that like putting on a pair of shoes? What's working with these guys?
More like a pair of pants.
A pair of pants.
Yes.
They come.
Comfortable pair of pants.
They come from far and wide. You said Tim's in Bellingham. Larry's moves around the Pacific Palisades and gets a new house every week.
He's the Pacific Palisades nomad.
They come to you up north. You guys, right?
That sounds kind of, the deep and heavy. It's like, they come to you up north. Lay the tracks.
Do you jam? Do you write? Do you have stuff ready? Do they bring stuff to the table? Tell me a little bit about your creative process.
This record I wrote. I just sat down, basically many years ago when my children were little monkeys running around. my wife, mostly my wife, every now and again I would, but my wife would read to them every single night before they went, they all ended up falling asleep.
Before they went sleepy time.
Yeah, sleepy time. They'd all fall asleep in the same bed. I'm downstairs watching TV, drinking wine. They did their thing, but I would get up there occasionally, but it was more their thing, you know?
Gotcha.
So on one occasion, I got up there and because they'd each pick like 5 books, the Pokey Puppy and, Good Night Moon or whatever. So, and then they got into the Harry Potters and all that stuff. But
Pokey Puppy.
The Pokey Pup.
Coming soon to a store near you. I love that.
Eventually, out came this book, The Rainbow Goblins. I'm like, what the hell is this? And I'm reading it, and I'm looking at it, and it's really, and it was, my wife had read it when she was a youngster, and it's written by this guy, Ulrich, who wrote it and did all the artwork, and it's these oil paints on panels. So it has this texture to it because it's painted on these wood panels. The artwork is spectacular. And the storyline is about these goblins that they feed on the colors of the rainbow, and they go and find the rainbows, and they last through the colors, and they gobble the colors down, and they're just these gluttonous goblins. It's very similar to what's going on the planet right now with various resources. So I just thought, this book's incredible.
It sounds like the perfect record for this time.
Perfection. I am always striving for perfection. At that time, and this is 20 years ago, I said this would be an incredible backdrop for a piece of music. And it just, one of those things I filed away. And
did you already know in your head that it was going to be a Primus project, or did you just think it could be any musical project?
No, it was just one of those things. And I'm finding as I'm getting older now, I got to start knocking some of these things off the list. I always talk about this big stove with all these pots on it, and I pull a pot to the front, and that's what I'm working on at that particular time. And there's all these pots. Well, I got to start knocking some of these pots off here because I'm going to fall off the planet here pretty soon, or at some point in time, sooner than 20 years ago. And I'm trying to knock some of these projects off. And we did the Wonka thing. That was something I'd been thinking about for a long time. We reinterpreted the music from Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, not Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. Let's get that perfectly clear. But I wanted to do this Ulrich thing. So I wasn't sure if it should be a Primus thing or a Delirium thing with Sean. And I wrote this one song, which eventually became The Storm. And I was very concerned that it was going to be a little too, 70s art rock utopia raw or something. And so I said, Lur, you want to hear this thing? Let me know what you think. And I played it for him over the phone, and he loved it. And so I said, okay, it's going to be a Primus thing. And from that point on, I just started working on different portions of the book until I had a narrative from A to Z.
Is the author still alive?
He is still alive. I have not personally been in touch with him. My manager, Ulrich.
He's the gentleman that resides in Switzerland, France, and Germany every other Tuesday or something.
I am not sure where he resides. He's sort of this mythical creature. I'm hearing rumors that he's a count of some sort.
That just so fits into the ecosystem of Primus, doesn't it?
Yeah, you can't count Ulrich. The thing that's amazing about the book is it's so colorful, yet there's this contrast of dark in it. So it's eerie and creepy, yet colorful and beautiful. So I'm very anxious to make the rainbow Primus shirts because it's not very often you see rock shirts, with rainbow colors and whatnot on them.
What's really cool, sort of curious about the practical elements of this. Does he get is there a credit in there for him for inspired by, or how does it?
We're utilizing all his artwork. We're actually selling packages with his book, with special edition versions of his book. It's all about pushing his art. We've always had a lot of interesting, or not, we've always had a lot of visuals with our stuff. I've done a lot of the covers. Friends of mine that are artists have done the covers and the sculptures and the videos and all this. It's a big part of what we've always done. It hasn't been us standing there so much, wearing our sexy speedos.
Sexy underwear.
Yeah. My girl bait underpants have never really made it to any of the videos, but there's
you are wearing
an animated beaver might come running through every now and again.
You are wearing them right now, right?
Of course.
Okay.
So to actually have a record that is based on someone else's art, it's actually a very exciting thing for me. And we've had some other people interpret some of his art, but I don't want to use any of that because it's just spectacular. And you as an art guy, I think you're going to really appreciate it.
Now that the record's out, the Desaturating 7, is there all kinds of touring and events being planned?
Yes. In the fall, we're doing a tour where we're going to, similar to what we did with the Wonka thing. We come out, we do a set of, all the Primus hits, and then a set change, and then come back out and we'll do the record in its entirety.
Oh, cool.
And then, if people want more, we'll come back out and play some Metallica songs.
I want to just circle South Park.
Yes.
Matt and Trey and that whole thing. You wrote the theme song. You're sort of buddies with them. Were you buddies first and then they asked you to write the song, or did you write the song and then you became buddies?
No, they were big fans. I think they were actually listening to the Holy Mackerel record that I had done when they were making the pilot episode. And so they contacted us, wanted to see if I would do it, and it was right when Brain had just joined the band. So I said, oh, well, let's do it with Brain. But nobody thought it was going to get on television, let alone be this worldwide phenomenon. We had seen Jesus versus Santa Claus, the Spirit of Christmas cartoon, and that's we were like, oh my God, it's amazing. We got to do this. And, they paid us like $17, and we did it, and that was it. Nobody. I don't even think they expected this. What's happened with them, but those are some clever guys. They're incredibly clever guys. Have you seen the Book of Mormon thing?
Yes, I have. I've seen it a couple times.
Unbelievable. The greatest thing about South Park and being a part of South Park is, as you know, you're a guy that has to cross the border quite a lot, go through customs, and you get that guy. I get that guy. I don't think you get that guy. But I get that guy that looks at me and goes, so you are a musician, huh? So what band? And I go, Primus. And they just glaze over like they have no idea what, and I say, I'm the guy at the beginning of South Park. They go, South Park? And they stamp me right through, It's unbelievable. They have helped me get through the customs more often than I could ever. I owe them quite a lot just for that.
So next time when I'm doing my customs and immigration thing and they look at me and I go Metallica and they're like, huh? If I just say...
They don't do that when you say Metallica. I'm going to start saying Metallica.
Dude, listen, I fly so much through SFO that I know all of them. Just not from Metallica, but from just too much traffic. It's like, hey, how you doing?
I don't know all of them.
So if I just say, when next time I come to one that doesn't remember, go... just check out the beginning of South Park. I didn't get the same sound effect.
Well, what if they call bullshit on you? Because they'll be go, oh, the guy that was just through here 25 minutes ago.
Then I've got you on speed dial.
I don't know that guy.
Earlier, you said something completely in passing that I've never heard you say before. You said two words. You said the word scuba diving.
Scuba diving?
Yeah. It should be no secret that a lot of us fellas in our age group have some pretty significant ear losses. If you see either Les or me overly nodding along in conversation, then it's because we can't hear what you're saying.
Can't hear a damn thing.
But you said that you thought that the scuba diving may have affected your hearing?
It did.
It did, okay, because my damage is from just fucking drumming and
snare drum,
all the nonsense, but you definitely have hearing issues from the scuba diving.
Well, 25 plus years ago, I was scuba diving off the coast of Carmel. And I was with a bunch of friends, and they were all great divers, and it was my first, certified dive on my own. And I was stressed, and I didn't have enough weight on. I couldn't get down, but I went down anyway, so I ruptured my inner ear. And when I came up, it was, whoa! And as soon as I got on dry land, I instantly started throwing up all over the place. I was like, what the hell's going on? I went to the doctor, and they said, oh, well, you got water on the ear. Here, take these seasick pills for a couple weeks. And then we went to Europe with Rush, and I was waiting for my hearing to come back in that ear, and it just slowly came back, but never all the way. So I went to the doc, this other doc, like a diving doc, and he looked at me, and within a minute, he said, well, this is what happened. He shows me the picture of the inner ear. He said, this ruptured, and because that ruptured, it created scar tissue, and you've lost this much of your hearing, and it's never coming back. See you later. And that was that. So
happy days.
And he actually checked my left ear, and he said, your left ear is actually better than average for your age, because even when I was a kid in high school playing in the bands, I would always shove cotton or whatever in my ears because I was paranoid about my hearing. So even when I was a carpenter running skill saws, I always had ear protection in. And it makes a big difference.
Wow, so he just point blank, your hearing's
yeah.
That's 25 years ago. Wow.
Plus.
So when you have in-ear monitors, do you have sort of like different levels, or do you have two different, if the ears aren't equal, is there two different things going on in the in-ears?
It's more about the high frequency. I don't hear hi-hat as well in this ear. I don't hear like just the sibilance. That's the hard part, is the sibilance, because when people are talking, what defines words is the consonants. So if you hear somebody, say, potato, and you don't hear the P, you don't know what the hell, they're saying.
These are the cool intellectual things. I don't know about the rest of the fucking radio shows out there, but come on. How cool is it to sit here and discuss whether a potato with or without a P?
With a P, yeah.
Come on.
I mean, basically, if I'm in a crowded restaurant and somebody's talking into my right ear, it's like Charlie Brown's teacher. It's just
Yikes.
so.
But the good news is, I guess, for a lot of guitar players and bass players, is that you can't hear the hi-hat in that ear.
I love hi-hat. That's my favorite part. Unless it's open. I'm not into the open hi-hat. Keep that closed.
There's a lot of people in your world that too much hi-hat.
It's a damn China symbol. I don't know who invented that damn thing.
Rhymes with bummer jokes.
I'm sure there's some great bass player jokes that you can throw my way, right?
Guy lands in Africa. He goes to his hotel room. This is the super short version. He goes to his hotel room. The bellman or whoever is walking up to his room, they open the windows and he hears the noise of distant drums and he's like, "What's going on there?" It's the sound of some tribe doing drumming thing, and it's cool, and it's, it goes on, and then, just be happy that it's the distant drums, because, when the distant drums stop, then we're in real trouble. Then the guy goes, "Well, what happens when the drums stop?" That's when the bass solo shows up.
Yep.
That was the short version of that. Other than that,
I'm laughing inside.
I know you are. So after Monastery Beach and the first certified dive there, did you walk away from it? Or, if somebody sits there and says, "Your hearing's f***ed," that seems like kind of a bummer.
It was a big bummer. And he said, "Your hearing's f***ed and do not ever dive again." And then in 93, my wife and her twin sister were backpacking around the world, and I went and met them in Thailand. And I'm on Koh Phi Phi Island. This was long before it was built up. And it was just unbelievably beautiful. And I was like, I gotta dive. So I actually got my advanced certification in Koh Phi Phi, but I never really would free dive because, as you know, going down with tanks, you can take your time and equalize as you go down. But free diving, you gotta get your ass down there. And I did do some free diving a couple years ago. First time I'd been.
Did that open up the issue again?
I went abalone diving up the coast and had a spectacular day. I got my limits, and it was amazing. But I did kind of feel some weirdness in my ear, so I didn't do it again.
We've managed to cover quite a few topics here on our Tall Tales, and your record's came out on your birthday nonetheless.
73 years old.
Desaturating 7. Is that a quote from the book?
No, when I was writing this thing, especially lyrically, it's very difficult to write about goblins and rainbows and not sound like you're in Tenacious D. You know what I mean? Like you're not just making a big joke. So I
appreciate the fact that you put that out there.
Well, I don't think I mentioned goblins once in the whole thing lyrically, and very rarely mentioned rainbows. So there's this more utilizing metaphors, implying different things to move the narrative forward. And the Desaturating 7, it's guys that are desaturating the world.
Very cool. There is a book by Ulrico, The Rainbow Goblins, that inspired this record. I listened to the record today. It's awesome. And you can listen to it now right here on Apple Music. Episode 22 of It's Electric comes to an end. Thank you, Les, for joining the shenanigans here. Thank you, everybody out there, for listening. Remember, never refer to yourself in the third person. Over and out. Lars Ulrich. See you later.
Peace 1.
It's Electric with Lars Ulrich.